You have lived in the same house on Kessler Avenue for 20 years, and your net worth is $18,400,000. Nobody on the street knows the second number. Most of them stopped noticing you around year 12, which is exactly how you planned it, though you'd never put it that way out loud. The gap isn't an accident. It's the whole thesis of your life. The performance of wealth and the architecture of wealth are two completely different structures, and almost nobody builds the second one because it doesn't photograph well. It doesn't get you invited anywhere. It just sits there, compounding, while you take the recycling bins to the curb on Tuesday nights in the same fleece vest you've owned since 2014. The scene that actually tells the story isn't dramatic. It's you standing in the garage at 6:40 on a Thursday morning, waiting for the coffee maker to finish, looking at a water stain on the ceiling you've meant to fix since 2019 and still haven't, because fixing it has never once been the point. You bought the house in Fort Collins, Colorado for $214,000 in your late 20s. Everyone told you it was a starter home. Nobody used that phrase as a compliment. Your college roommate bought a place twice the size 11 miles away and posted about it. You didn't buy a bigger one. You bought 4 more houses instead, not to live in, just to hold. And you never told anyone the difference between "we're staying because we love the neighborhood" and "we're staying because moving costs money and I have somewhere better to put it." That's the spark, if you can even call it that. Not a broken vending machine, not a "for sale by owner" sign nailed to a fence post, just a decision made quietly at 29 to stop treating your house as a status update and start treating it as the calmest, cheapest line item in a much bigger spreadsheet. 20 years of staying put does something to a person. This is the story of what it did to you. The math moment came 8 months after closing, at your kitchen table with a calculator app and a legal pad. Your mortgage on Kessler Avenue was $1,240 a month. Rent on a comparable place 2 streets over was $1,650. That $410 gap didn't feel like anything. It felt like the kind of number you'd forget by lunch. You didn't forget it. You wrote it at the top of the legal pad and underlined it twice. A year later, a duplex went up for sale 4 blocks north. Ugly siding, a tenant already in place, owned by a retired mail carrier named Gordon Huffnagel, who just wanted it gone before winter. You paid $161,000. The existing tenant covered the whole mortgage payment and left you $190 a month on top. Not glamorous, not even interesting really. Just a number sitting there every month, doing what numbers do when nobody's watching them. You didn't stop at the duplex. 18 months later, you bought a triplex near the CSU campus for $289,000. 3 separate leases, net $640 a month once you'd budgeted for a new water heater and a leaking roof valley. The tenants were mostly juniors and seniors who signed in August and left in May, reliable as a school calendar. Then came a 4-plex out past Old Town, bought from a woman named Denise O'Coffer, who was moving to Arizona to be near her son. $410,000, net $980 a month, and a filing cabinet full of her old maintenance records that turned out to be more useful than the inspection report. By your mid-30s, you owned Kessler Avenue and 11 rental units spread across 3 properties, and you still drove the same Subaru Outback you'd bought used in your first year out of college. The engine light had been on for 4 months. You knew exactly what was wrong with it, a sensor, $60. And you also knew fixing it would mean thinking about it, and you had better things to think about. 20 years in one house isn't stillness. It's the illusion of stillness stacked 11 properties deep. You met Bryce Calloway at a Chamber of Commerce mixer the year you turned 38, and you clocked him before he ever opened his mouth. Land Rover in the parking lot still had the dealer plates, a quarter zip with an embroidered logo from a golf club nobody had heard of. He introduced himself by describing his portfolio before anyone asked, and somewhere in the second sentence mentioned he'd just refinanced his house to pull cash for a boat. You mentioned you owned a fourplex near campus. He nodded politely and moved on to someone more interesting. You let him. Being underestimated at a mixer has never once cost you money. By then, you'd added a small strip of storage units off Highway 14, bought from a retiring contractor named Alvin Petrowski for $340,000, netting $1,900 a month once the fencing was repaired, and a laundromat on Mulberry Street that came with 4 industrial washers older than your marriage and a landlord who just wanted a tenant who paid on time. Net income across everything by then? A little over $9,000 a month, most of it invisible to anyone who'd ever seen you take out the recycling. Your sister Angela called in October of that year. Her husband had lost his job in a round of layoffs, and their second mortgage payment was 3 weeks late. She didn't ask you for money outright, she wasn't built that way, but the shape of the conversation made it obvious what she needed, and you could have solved it in one transfer without blinking. You didn't send a check. You drove to her place with the legal pad instead, the same kind you'd used at 29, and you sat with her for 4 Saturdays building a real budget, calling her lender about a hardship modification, walking her through what equity actually meant in the house she'd almost stopped believing was an asset. It was slower. It was harder to explain to her at the time, but a check disappears in a season, and a method doesn't. You'd watched enough people find that out the hard way to trust the slower version more than you trusted your own generosity. Angela's still in that house. She still calls, but not about the mortgage anymore. The number itself arrived the way numbers like that always do, quietly, in an email from your accountant, a woman named Patricia Furlong who has done your taxes since the duplex year and has never once commented on the total, only on the deductions. The subject line said, 2026 Portfolio Summary, Draft for Review. You opened it standing at the same kitchen counter, coffee going lukewarm, the Subaru's check engine light finally actually fixed the week before because the sensor had gone from $60 to $140, and that annoyed you more than the light itself ever had. The spreadsheet had 11 line items, Kessler Avenue at the top, valued now at just under $600,000, the smallest percentage of the total, and somehow still the one you scrolled to first. Below it, the duplex, the triplex, the fourplex, the storage units, the laundromat, 2 more properties you'd added in your 40s that hadn't made it into the story yet. At the bottom, in a bolded cell Patricia always bolds out of habit rather than ceremony, net worth $18,412,006. You didn't say anything out loud. Your spouse was upstairs. The water stain on the ceiling was still there, a little bigger than it had been in 2019, still not fixed, still not the point. You closed the laptop and went to take the recycling bins to the curb because it was Tuesday, and because 20 years of Tuesdays is exactly how a number like that gets built without anyone on Kessler Avenue ever noticing it happened. What would your life look like if you stopped performing wealth and started quietly building it instead?